As we get started here, I'd like to open with a quick little video, so if you can run that for me, please.
Are we all ready for music's biggest night? Welcome to the 54th Grammy Awards.
We could have had it all, rolling in the deep. You have my heart and soul in your head, and you played it to the beat.
And the Grammy, it goes to...
And the Grammy goes to.
And the Grammy goes to.
And the Grammy goes to.
You have my heart and soul in your head.
Someone like you.
Adele Atkins and Paul Epworth.
Rolling in the deep, Adele!
Thank you so much. This is ridiculous. It's been the most life-changing year.
We'd like to thank all of our opening acts tonight. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
So I was debating about whether or not to show that video. It's about 3 minutes, and with about a 30-minute keynote, it's not very much time, but I figured after seeing everybody last night and after seeing the debauchery that was going on, I figured I'd start today off with a little bit more energy. So, so thanks for indulging. So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what in the world are the Grammys doing at a search conference, and I'll be candid with you that it's a good question, and the reality is that from a search standpoint, we are not as data heavy as a lot of the people in this room. I think we could be better, and frankly, we are very open to finding new solutions. But what I'm here to do is I'm here to share what we've been doing in the world of TV and social and search, and give you a little bit of a case study to kind of show you where we were and where we are, and hopefully end off with where we think we might be going. So, you know, as we started down this road, about 5.5 years ago, this social media road, we discovered a universal truth. And that universal truth is that when it comes to social media, there's two things that people are really looking for. They're looking for discovery, and they're looking for community. And that's a theme that I'm going to hit on throughout the next 30 minutes. So let's talk about social and TV. And I think that as we start talking about the merging of social and TV, it's really important to go back several years to some perceived threats in the marketplace and some perceived threats to TV. The first threat that I want to touch on was this thing called TiVo. It was a game changer, and it made a lot of people in the TV world nervous. It threatened TV viewing patterns, and frankly, it threatened advertising revenue. Then there was this little thing that came along called the internet, which made people really nervous because people were predicting the death of television, people were going to be stealing programming, there was going to be massive infringement, all of the ad dollars that were spent that people and brands had been conditioned to spend on TV were all going to shift online, and basically all that was going to be left was the carcass of the old guard. Well, I think we all know that that didn't happen, and lo and behold, the internet is essentially additive to television. And as evidenced by the fact that virtually every network now has a chief digital officer who's not only lauding the benefits of social, but spending a lot of time, effort, resources against that idea, and trying to drive as much engagement through social as possible. So when you talk about TV, when we talk about TV and specifically about the Grammys, it's a pretty universal experience. This is the way people used to consume television. This is how people consume television today. People are jacked in, people have 2, 3, sometimes even more devices than that. And when we talk about our experience at the Grammys, when we started this science experiment called social media, the reality is we were pretty behind the times. And it felt like we were etching things into stone tablets, learning it for the first time. The truth is that at the Recording Academy, which is the umbrella organization of the Grammy Awards, and that's the name on my paycheck every other week, at the Recording Academy, when we started talking about social and started to talk about a two-way dialogue with our audience, it was a terrifying experience. We're a traditional organization. We're very conservative. In a lot of ways, we're lumbering and we're very afraid. But at the same time, we also realized that as the most meaningful brand in music, we needed to be involved in a meaningful way in the digital music conversation that was going on around us and not simply be passive observers of it. So strategically, we decided that, you know what, we're going to take this really seriously. We're going to take this function in-house. We're not going to outsource our strategy. We're going to create a social media team. We're going to figure it out. We're going to take a lot of bumps and bruises. We're going to make some mistakes. We're going to get it wrong more than we get it right at the beginning, but ultimately it'll get us on the right path. So we asked ourselves, how do we engage? And I'm sure a lot of people in this room have had the same experience where you have some genius, and it might have even been some of us, who raises their hand in a meeting about strategy and says, you know what, we need a viral video. We need to find a way that we need to make something really cool, and we need to make it go viral. Well, it's obviously easier said than done. The reality is you can't legislate something going viral, and you can't force engagement. So we decided to enter social slowly, methodically, and making sure that we do it the right way, building our social ecosystem, one friend, one fan, one follower at a time. The reason is today's consumers are a lot more savvy than they've ever been before. They're more engaged, they're more opinionated, they want to be involved, and frankly, they're more cynical than ever before. So I wanted to touch on kind of the way it used to be and the way it is now. Back in the day, when you upset people, there were these things called letter writing campaigns. And people would get together, write letters to the CEO, and try and change brand behavior, try and affect brand behavior. Well, now it's a lot, Now it's a lot more simple. Now they simply unfollow. And frankly, it's a lot more profound, because given the fragmentation in the market and given all the choices that we as consumers have, when you lose somebody, you've pretty much lost them for good. It's really hard to get somebody back. So I think that from our standpoint, we realized and we recognized that consumers and frankly our fans needed to be respected. And social is not today's gimmick. Social is today's DNA. And when you think about how to reach people, you know, it used to be if you needed to reach more people, you just heavy up on more TV, more print, more radio, maybe more outdoor. It doesn't work like that anymore. Nowadays, as we all know, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but I'm trying to frame the discussion for where the Grammys have actually gone. So people exist in different pockets, different spheres of influence, across different media, and across a variety of devices. But what really happens, the magic really starts to happen when you start to get these concentric circles of influence. And that's where engagement happens, is right in the center. And that's what we are trying to do, because at the end of the day, fans want to connect, fans want to engage, fans want to discover, and fans want to share. And when I use the word fan, that's a little bit provincial, because from the Recording Academy and the music industry, we look at people as fans, but you can interchange the word fans with consumers. It really doesn't matter. So that brings us to the question of search. That brings us to the question of Grammys and search. The reality is, what most people don't realize about us, about the Grammys, is that the Recording Academy, which is the umbrella organization, we are a not-for-profit trade organization that was founded over 50 years ago to improve the lives of music makers. Why do I tell you that? Because I want to illustrate that as a not-for-profit company, we have incredibly limited budgets. We make a very little go a very long way. We created, actually, the biggest brand in the history of music by accident because we happened to produce a television show over 50 years ago that galvanized the world and ultimately became our calling card. But at the end of the day, we have very limited resources to execute what we need to do. So we asked ourselves, where do we spend these dollars? Do we want to do paid search? Is that the best use of our limited dollars? And we said, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe not at the beginning. What we should do is we're going to spend the money that we have on digital engagement. We're going to try and create as much digital activity as we can to get in front of consumers and surround the music conversation. And if we're successful and if we do a reasonably good job, what we're going to do is we're going to become top of mind. We're going to become more relevant in the music conversation. But we have a challenge that a lot of brands out there don't have, right? My new friend Isabel at cars.com, you know, her job is to try and move as many cars as possible. We don't sell cars. We don't sell widgets. We don't sell devices. Essentially, the Grammys represents an idea. The Grammys represents a brand that stands for prestige, excellence, heritage, integrity. And at the end of the day, you know, what we ultimately want is for people to tune in and watch the Grammy telecast because a rising tide lifts all boats, and that helps us all throughout the year. But the truth is, by creating this enormous brand by the virtue of a single television event held once per year, there was this light bulb moment that went off and said, you know what? If we could do this accidentally because of a 3.5-hour television event, how powerful a brand could we be if we took a proactive brand management approach for the other 364 days? So when we started with the idea of search, there wasn't a lot of activity around the Grammys. There wasn't a lot of digital activity. Right around the show, people did, you know, keyword search Grammys. It was pretty limited. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for us to engage. And frankly, there were very few things that we were doing that made people care, that encouraged people to care. So we asked, from a search standpoint, how do we get people to find us? And the answer was relatively simple. At least it sounded simple at the time. The more present and visible that we are, the more people are going to want to search for us, and we want to be present in as many meaningful music conversations as possible. Then we started thinking, you know what? Who's our audience? Is our audience who Nielsen tells us our audience is? I mean, there's a lot of debate. I think there's some healthy, robust debate about whether Nielsen remains the definitive standard. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know, but it certainly is a debate. But we did some psychographic modeling and psychographic profiling when we realized that there were some segments, some pretty significant segments out there of underserved Grammy consumers. And we named them brilliantly: audiophiles, dynamos, and good timers. And I won't go into all the definitions, but I put this slide up just to illustrate excuse me, just to illustrate that we started to change our thinking. We started to shift our perspective on what we do, how we do it, who we reach, and how we try to reach them. So at the end of the day, for us, it's about the conversation. And when you're talking about social, that's it. That's as simple as it gets. It's about the conversation. And how do we add to this conversation on a consistent basis, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? And how do we add to this conversation from the standpoint of introducing innovation as often as we can? And I don't mean innovation, I don't mean world-changing innovation. I'm talking about big innovation and small innovation. Innovation can be as simple as a trivia question. Innovation can be as simple as hitting somebody with a question that they weren't prepared for and telling them something new. So, you know, when we started with the idea that we had to start shifting perception and changing the way people think about the Grammys, we realized that we have an extraordinary opportunity during the window people expect conversation to be happening, which is the window leading up to the Grammy Awards. So we wanted to use that window. We started working with Chiat Day. We've now been working with them for about 6 years in my opinion, in my unsolicited, unbiased opinion, I think they're one of the best shops around. And they've helped us reframe our communication and our marketing strategy leading up to the telecast. So I'm going to show you something right now that really was a tipping point for us. And the reason it was a tipping point is we did this campaign for the Grammys 3 years ago. It was the first campaign that was ever constructed 100% out of social media components that were uploaded that were uploaded by friends, fans, and followers. YouTube videos, Flickr photos, tweets. They opted in. They sent us their submissions. Nobody knew what we were going to do with them, and we constructed our campaign from them. I'm going to show you this spot right now, and then I'm going to tell you a little story about what happened, and what we did from there. So if you wouldn't mind playing number 2. So we let Lady Gaga leak that spot. And when she leaked it, something extraordinary happened. All of these people, nobody knew who was going to be in the spot. Nobody knew what we were going to use. Nobody knew what submissions we were going to use to construct this. Nobody even knew essentially what we were going to do with it. They just opted in and gave us permission because they trusted us. When people saw themselves in a national Grammy TV spot focused on Lady Gaga, they lost their minds. People started tweeting, posting, sharing, blogging. We broke the counter on YouTube. People were watching this 30-second TV spot. A piece of 30-second advertising started getting unbelievable virality. And it basically started to reposition us in the marketplace in a very jaded, difficult, with a jaded, difficult group. And, you know, what it did was it showed us that there's a whole lot of room for us to expand, and there's a whole lot of things that we can do. So after that, the next year, we said, you know what? We think that we made a lot of progress, but the next step is mobile, right? How do we integrate mobile in a meaningful way? How do we reach out and create a more dynamic relationship with this social ecosystem that we're creating? And so we created a campaign called Music is Life is Music that was really all about chronicling an artist's journey to the Grammy stage. And then we empowered consumers to tell their musical journey. We created an app called Music Mapper, and I'll show you a piece on that. Essentially what it allowed you to do is drop a pin anywhere, tag your story, choose a song or multiple songs that illustrate your story, whether it's where you met your sweetheart, whether it's, you know, your first concert, something else important when you got your first job. Doesn't really matter. You can literally map your entire musical journey and then share that, overlay it with your friends, overlay it with other artists to see how that kind of compares and contrasts with other people's musical journey, with the message being that everybody's musical journey culminates at the Grammy Awards. So let me show you this next piece.
Music is life. And with the new Music Mapper app, now you can write your own audio autobiography. Drop tracks, tell stories, map your own personal musical journey, and share it with the world. Download Music Mapper soon at musicislifeismusic.com. And don't miss the 53rd Grammys, Sunday, February 13th, only CBS.
So once we started to shift sentiment and kind of create an expectation about the Grammys innovation, the question became, how do we keep people coming back? What do we do to continue to kind of feed this conversation? And basically, we want to make sure that there's as many ways as possible for people to find us, and again, we want to surround the music conversation. So how do we do that? I'm going to give you guys just a small handful of examples. One of the ways we do that is through borrowed equity and making sure that we're in business with the right brands for the right reasons. So we've created a number of strategic brand partnerships, strategic social partnerships. You know, innovation can be as simple as tweeting trivia on a daily basis. This was a tweet that we did 2 days ago. I just thought it was interesting, and I thought I'd share it with you guys. Now, when the Grammys has a conversation with people, it's not about how great we are. It's not about that we're going to choose the next great artist. It simply is wherever music is happening, wherever music is important, it's where we want to be. And we want to tell you about it. We want to tell you about it from our standpoint, from our vantage point. We're also involved in live music events. So about 2 weeks ago, we put together a concert with Bon Jovi to kick off Grammy season. We did that in conjunction with our partner MasterCard. We streamed it online. If any of you are interested, the stream is still available for the next, I think, 2 weeks at, I think, priceless.com/LA Grammys. And we added, there was a live Twitter feed along with the event. Again, adding to the conversation. From a music festival standpoint, we are on the ground. We are backstage at Bonnaroo, at Stagecoach, at Lala, at South by, at Coachella. Why? Because we want to tell people what's going on. We want to interact with artists. We'll give over our Twitter account to artists backstage. We'll let them talk to their fans. We'll retweet them. They'll retweet us. We're literally we just want to be boots on the ground and sharing what we think is important, or at least what we think is interesting. Content. We've been spending a considerable amount of resources on building our content infrastructure, building our syndication infrastructure. One of the programs that has become sort of a franchise for us in the last couple of years is we've created a content program to highlight and chronicle our 5 Best New Artist nominees from nomination all the way through to award presentation. We did it last year on Pandora. We had a partnership with Pepsi to help us distribute it. It was distributed through Pepsi, through Grammy.com, through CBS.com, through Pandora. We're going to extend that alliance through Vivo. So syndication, trying to reach people wherever they are. We're also building an alliance with Procter & Gamble right now. And this isn't all about partnerships, but these partners do actually help us amplify our message in a pretty meaningful way. We're creating a program this year about the intersection between music, beauty, fashion, and we're using them to help us amplify. From a music platform standpoint, there's Grammy playlists on Spotify. The telecast is Shazamable. iTunes, there's visibility on iTunes. There's playlists, iHeartRadio. We also created, about 4 years ago, we were the first award show to ever create a true second screen experience. That's since expanded and evolved into a true third screen experience, but we call it Grammy Live, and essentially we take people behind the velvet rope for 3 days leading up to the show. Friday starting with our world famous Person of the Year tribute. This year we're going to honor Bruce Springsteen. Saturday night we have our world famous Clive Davis party. Sunday night's the Grammy Awards. We take people backstage. People can actually see when talent comes off stage, taking their official Grammy portraits, etc. There's millions and millions and millions of people who are engaging in real time with Grammy Live as the show is happening. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek into this year's Grammy campaign. Beyond the fact that I am in love with the tagline, you'll notice that the tagline, it's the first tagline for a major campaign that uses a hashtag. Why do we use a hashtag? Beyond the obvious reasons, because we want to be involved in as many music conversations as possible. So now the world is listening. We'll hopefully lead you into a Grammy dialogue. If you want to hashtag Grammy Best New Artist, hopefully that'll lead you into a Grammy dialogue, etc. And I just figured, it would be fun for everybody if I just showed you guys a little bit of what the creative vibe is going to be for this year. You'll see the top, that's Grace Potter. On the right is Gary Clark Jr. If you guys don't know who he is, he's probably today's biggest guitar virtuoso, which people are already starting to make comparisons between him and Hendrix, which is an astounding comparison, but he's the real deal. We also have the Black Keys, we have Taylor Swift, among many others. So, you'll be starting to see this creative, this look and this spirit and this vibe very, very soon. So we also realized that there was very inconsistent communication when it came to talking about the Grammys, and that was our fault. That was internal as well as external. So we created a Facebook playbook so that we've created now this army of evangelists within the Recording Academy so that when people talk about us and talk about the place they work, they can use a consistent vibe, they can use a consistent tone, and make sure that they streamline how they're talking about us. We also created what we're calling our social media Bible that we give to all media, that gives all of our hashtags, gives all of our proper websites, gives all of our platforms, and basically allows, when media is talking about us, it allows them to sort of funnel the conversation in a really seamless and effective way. So having said all this, what's the result? What's the result of all this? The result is that we're now linked with a variety of topics across the music industry, across artists. We're constantly adding to the dialogue, and ultimately this opens up our world to expanded search topics and expanded ways to reach out and connect with our friends, our fans, and our followers. I said this earlier, but I think it bears repeating. It's about the conversation, period. And that's how we feel about it, and that we feel very strongly about that, and that thesis has played out and actually has been positively reinforced from our standpoint for many years. So the reality is, I think we've done a reasonably good job, and I'm going to share some results with you in just a moment. I think we've done a reasonably good job, but I'm not here to present myself or the Grammys or the Academy as the definitive standard. I'm certainly not up here to tell you we're doing everything right. I think that we have a lot to learn about data. I think we have a lot to learn about how we monitor. I think we have. I think we're frankly, behind the curve in a lot of ways from a measurement standpoint. And I think we need to get better at that. We have some pretty simple KPIs, right? As we start to think about how we're gonna judge the effectiveness of our efforts. There's really three main KPIs that we look at. First is sentiment, the second is engagement, and the third is ratings. So let's talk about ratings. This year was a monster year for us. A lot of people did their jobs right. There was a lot of seamless integration. It's tough to know which components and which elements were attributable to which pieces of our ratings, so we just need to keep doing all of it, right? So let me take you through some of those results. So our largest audience in 30 years. We had 40 million viewers. For the very first time in our history, we surpassed the Oscars in viewership. We basically, it was our second largest audience we've ever had. We had over 74 million people watching part or all of the show. And we experienced a 48% viewership increase, which is one of the largest increases in the history of Nielsen. From a social standpoint, this is the piece that I'm equally proud of. During the telecast, during the 3 hours before and after the telecast, we amassed over 13 million social comments, which puts the 54th Annual Grammy Awards in the unique position of being the most social event in the history of television, surpassing the Super Bowl, and we've kept that position even after the Olympics. So the opening and closing ceremonies didn't knock us off our perch, and we were very nervous about that. During the Grammy telecast, we had over 160,000 tweets per minute talking about the Grammy Awards. That was an increase of over 2,100% from the prior year. So, again, I think that it's important to note that social has massively expanded our reach. It's allowed us to draw a lot more people into the conversation. It's created a more compelling and exciting TV experience. And frankly, it's positively impacted our brand in innumerable ways. But it leaves us with the question of, what do we do now? And I think the answer to that are, we need better analytics, better metrics. We need to know what to do with all of this sort of success that we've had. We need better quantitative evaluation to determine, frankly, what's working and what isn't, right? We're doing all of this stuff that we're all kind of, we're really happy about and really proud about, this program, that program, the other program. Frankly, we don't know if one program is massively more successful than the other. And those are things that I think that we need to start gathering data and start parsing that data. So this is sort of how I look at the future for us. We've achieved a certain level of success, but it's a double-edged sword, because with success comes huge expectations. And the thing that kind of keeps me up at night is the question of, how do we stay in front? How do we take this position that we've carved out for ourselves, and how do we really solidify that and continue driving forward in this way. And I think, you know, when you look at this graphic, I think the results are that little sliver of ice that's visible from above the surface. But I also think that for us, the next story, the next piece of the story is how we use data and how we mine data, and that's the big platform underneath that the results sit on top of. So that's really it for me. I know it's been a lot of data overload for the last 3 days, so I appreciate everybody's attention, and thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Yes.
You talked about the volumes of conversations. Sorry. Joe Kaufman from Engage. You talked about the volume of conversations. Can you talk a little bit about the content of those conversations and how you interact? And you said you only insert yourselves into the conversation when it's relevant. When is it relevant for the Grammys to talk back to somebody who's having a conversation?
Well, it's a two-part question, right? I think when we talk about when we enter a conversation, we're constantly involved in the conversation, right? So whether it's Twitter, Facebook, whether we're doing Google Hangouts on, we're talking about people, we're talking about things in music that we think are relevant, and we're engaging in a two-way dialogue. We're talking to artists back and forth. But I think you said something that, maybe this wasn't the point you're making, but it's something that's come up on a lot of occasions. We used to engage, as a lot of brands did, in exclusively push marketing, right? Where we told people what we wanted to know, what we wanted them to know about us. And when we opened the dialogue the other way, it was really frightening, because what if people told us we suck, right? What if people told us they hated us? Fortunately, that happened a lot less frequently than we were afraid of. But we get into controversies every year. A couple of years ago, we trimmed our awards categories from 110 down to 78. Well, that upset a lot of people. So the question was, there was all this chatter going on. We have to ask ourselves, do we let some of that negativity burn itself out? Or do we try and enter the fray and try and correct, sort of course correct, which is really dangerous too, right? I mean, if you jump in, you're sort of opening yourself up for more scrutiny. So while we let conversations happen, we have to be selective about which ones we decide to engage in. It's sort of a case-by-case basis. There's no standard rule book about, that says, well, this one said, the rule book says we have to jump into this one versus this one. We kind of have to look at the totality of the conversation, the implications, who's saying what. Is it just, frankly, is it crazy people who just want a platform, or is there something really meaningful that we need to kind of set the record straight on? I'll give you another quick example. So several years ago, a prominent member of the Dave Matthews Band passed away, right? His name is Leroy Moore. And every year, and it happened right before the Grammy Awards happened. This was, I think, 3 years ago. And every year we have an in memoriam segment where we honor people that pass away. Well, there's no way we can possibly honor everyone, because a massive amount of people, unfortunately, pass every year. Well, the package had already been put together. He died right before the show. If any of you know DMB, I mean, Dave Matthews has a massive, like, rabid fan following. So when people saw that Leroy Moore was not in the in memoriam segment, there were a lot of really, really upset people. And so there was this conversation that just happened about how terrible the Grammys are, and why would you do? And so that was a really tough one for us to decide. Do we want to get in the fray? Do we want to put our CEO in the middle of the dialogue? And so, those are things that we have to grapple with on a constant basis. Long answer to a short question, sorry.
Hi,
yes.
Evan. Thanks for coming, first of all.
Sure.
I have a question. You say it's all about the conversation. So do you ever put conversations or questions in site links or paid search ads where you would ask a question, maybe a trivia question about the Grammys that would lead to a landing page?
It's a good question. We haven't done that. And again, I think that's probably an area that we could be looking at, and there's a number of areas we could be better at. When we start, when I talk about trivia questions, I'm talking about, Twitter conversations, Facebook conversations, telling people, did you know You know, did you know this date, you know, this was the date that the Rolling Stones first went on tour? So really just giving kind of a bird's eye view of the industry and giving little tidbits of information. And hopefully, if they're interesting enough, it sort of invites and inspires a response. And, you know, the more that stuff gets shared, the more that comes back to us.
I mean, you could give them in a site link or a paid search ad, you can do a trivia question, and then if they get the answer correct, you can give them a free download of the song.
Yep. No, it's certainly something that we could be doing, and I think there's a lot of things that we're not necessarily doing.
Well, fair enough. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys.